Everyone thinks they know what a breakup is, that it's about endings, that it's about loss, that it's about someone leaving and taking something with them. But what if this isn't the real story? Scorpio doesn't lose easily. When Scorpio loves, they go all in. They give what is most true, most hidden, most real to them. And when that ends, for whatever reason, the pain isn't generic, it's specific, it's deep. It's the kind of pain that doesn't go away with distraction, that has no shortcuts, that demands a real journey. But there's something nobody told you about this journey. There is a logic behind what seemed like destruction, an architecture that you couldn't see from within the pain. A reason, not random, not cruel, not senseless, for it to have happened exactly when it happened, in the way it happened, to the person it happened to. It's not a coincidence. It's not punishment. It's not the universe ignoring you. It's a redirection. And the difference between seeing it as a loss or as a direction absolutely changes everything that comes next. In this video, you'll understand why Scorpio processes breakups in a way that no other sign does. Why the obsessive internal review isn't weakness. It's the beginning of something. Why what was removed from your life was, in some way you can't yet fully see, occupying the space of what was truly yours. And you will understand why God didn't abandon you at that moment. He was preparing something that can only be received by those who have gone through what you have gone through, something that is exactly the right size for who you are becoming. Stay until the end. There's a part here that will change how you see what happened to you. This question seems simple, but it carries a weight that most questions don't. Because if this separation had to happen, then what you're calling a failure might be something entirely different. It could be the beginning of something you can't yet see from here. It was while searching for answers to this that I found this digital book, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign Towards a Life of Purpose. It's not a book that will give you ready-made answers about what to do now. It's a book that helps you see the invisible architecture behind what happened to you. The sacred logic that exists beneath everything that seemed like pure destruction. For Scorpio, who naturally lives in the depths, who instinctively knows that things have more than one layer, this type of content is not escapism. It's a tool. It's a map of a terrain you're already traversing, but still without knowing the names of the streets. You are in this moment right now. The review is still running inside, the question is still in the air, the discomfort is still active, and that's exactly why acting now makes sense. Not after the pain passes, not when you feel stronger or more whole. Now, while you are still within the process, and this content can reach you in a way that may not be possible later. The link is in the first pinned comment, but be aware, this content may be taken down. Click now and download your copy. Tell me in the comments, after your breakup, was there a moment when you felt, deep down, quietly, that it wasn't just about the other person, that something inside you was trying to change? Write it down. I want to read it, because there is a fundamental difference between what happened to you and what you believe happened to you, and that difference changes everything. Scorpio doesn't grieve in just any way. There's no such thing as generic, superficial grief that passes in a few weeks with distractions and company. When Scorpio loses something they truly loved, the pain goes all the way to the root. And Scorpio has deep roots, deeper than most people can imagine, and deeper than Scorpio themselves sometimes admit to themselves. This pain has a different name than it seems, because it's not just sadness. It's not just longing, it's a kind of existential disorientation, a feeling that the ground you were standing on was more solid than you realized, until it wasn't there anymore. And now you're trying to figure out where to put your foot, which direction to look, what is still real. What most people don't understand is that Scorpios don't cry over just anything. They don't grieve over small things. When a Scorpio suffers in this way, in this deep, silent way that can't be fully explained to anyone, it's because what was lost was real. It was true. It was something that mattered in a way that goes beyond common categories, and this intensity of grief isn't pathology. It's proportion. It's the appropriate response to the magnitude of what existed. And this is the first thing that needs to be said clearly. The intensity of what you are feeling is not weakness. It's not exaggeration. It's not you being too much, a criticism that Scorpios learn to hear far too early in life. It's proportional to what was real, and what was real deserves to be processed seriously, not hastily. But prosecution doesn't mean imprisonment, and that's where the hardest part begins, when you're already inside. There's a version of Scorpio that got lost within that separation, not in the dramatic sense that you lost yourself, but in the precise sense that part of your identity was anchored in that relationship. The version of you that existed within that bond, that had a role, a dynamic, a way of seeing yourself reflected in the eyes of another person. A narrative of yourself that made sense within that context. Think of it this way: within that relationship, even if imperfect, even if tense at times, you knew who you were. You had a place. You had a sense of where you were in the story. When the bond breaks, that mirror disappears, and Scorpio is left looking at a space where there was once a reflection, trying to see themselves without it, trying to recognize their own contours without that reference. It's disconcerting in a way that goes beyond words, and that's precisely why the review begins. Scorpio needs to understand it's an almost physical necessity to map what happened, find the logic, name the moments, and then the work begins. Reviewing each scene, each conversation, each decision, looking for where the mistake lies, where the thread began to unravel, where the other version of themselves would have done things differently. The problem is that sometimes the thread wasn't unraveling, it simply came to an end, and there isn't a specific frame where everything could have been saved, because there was nothing to save. There was something to go through. But Scorpio doesn't accept that easily. You need to be sure. And then the review continues, and guilt begins to build, not because it's real, but because the Scorpio mind needs an explanation, and lacking a sufficiently convincing one from the outside, it begins to construct one from the inside. You should have done things differently, said less, expected more, been someone else. And then, at some point within this spiral, something changes frequency. Exhaustion arrives, not as weakness, but as a signal, like the body saying that the review has done all it could and that now it's time for something else. For a different question, not where did I go wrong, but what was this ending opening up? There's a specific moment in a Scorpio's life that seems like the worst of all, but is, in fact, the most important. It's when you realize that revision won't give you the answer you're looking for, that there's no scene to fix, that the past won't change no matter how much you analyze it. And it is precisely at this moment, in this vacuum between the end of the review and the beginning of something new, that this book can make a real difference. The Divine Path that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose speaks directly to this territory that Scorpio knows so well, the space between what has ended and what has not yet begun. The transformation zone where everything seems uncertain, but where, in fact, the most profound changes are happening. This book won't tell you what to feel. It will help you understand what you are feeling is building. Scorpio instinctively knows that the true answers don't lie on the surface. This book is for those willing to delve deep, for those who have already understood that quick comfort is no longer enough and are ready for something more substantial and truthful. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey toward the clarity and genius you deserve. And then comes the paradox, the thing that disrupted everything and which at the same time is the only thing that begins to make sense. There is a possibility that Scorpio rarely considers while still grieving, but which inevitably arises as the process deepens, the possibility that what was lost wasn't what was meant to remain, not because it was inherently bad, not because the person was inherently wrong, but because, in some way that wasn't yet fully visible, that bond was occupying the space of something greater. Think of it this way. When you have an open door in front of you, you don't see what's behind it. You see the door. You go through the door. You organize your life around that opening. And while it's there, your attention, your energy, your sense of direction, everything is oriented towards it. It's natural, it's human, it's what everyone does. When the door closes, when it's closed from the outside without your choice, the space that remains is disconcerting. It feels empty. It feels like a loss. It feels like something has been taken from you without permission. But then you start looking around, and you begin to notice other doors, doors that were there all along, but that you weren't seeing because your attention was entirely focused on the other one. This is the invisible mechanism behind Scorpio's separation. It wasn't destruction, it was redirection. And here comes the part that might hurt before it makes sense. The person you lost, however real the love may have been, however genuine the bond, was somehow limiting the scope of what was possible for you. Not necessarily consciously or intentionally. But they were. And while they were there, you couldn't see what was on the other side. Scorpio has a peculiar relationship with power. Not external power, which imposes, which dominates, but internal power, which knows, which perceives, which accesses layers that most people don't even suspect exist. And this power, when it's within a bond that no longer fits, begins to yield. It begins to adapt to the size of that space. It begins to become smaller than it is. The separation, however painful, however unfair, premature, or senseless it may seem, may have been the only way for its power to have space to return to its true size. And this, Scorpio, is no cheap consolation. It's an observation about how your nature works. You don't fit in small spaces. You never have. And when you try, something inside you begins to slowly disappear, so slowly that sometimes you only notice the absence after the space changes. What remains after the separation, what remains when the dust begins to settle a little, is not ruin. It's material. It's everything that is genuinely yours, that didn't depend on the other person to exist. That was there before and will continue to be. Clearer now, more accessible, like gold that only appears after the fire has passed. The fire didn't create the gold was already there. The fire only removed what wasn't gold. And now the real question, what do you do with that gold? Scorpio's reconstruction doesn't work like that of other signs. It's not about returning to the starting point. It's not about recovering what was before. And this is a distinction that changes everything, becoming something more complete than what was. Using what happened as raw material for a version of oneself that didn't yet exist, and that perhaps couldn't exist without that specific passage. This isn't automatic, it's not simple, and it doesn't have a defined deadline, but it's real. And for Scorpio, who has known transformation from a very young age, who has the map of rebirth in their very nature, this process has a profound familiarity. Even when it hurts, there's something recognizable in the movement, an ancestral memory that passing through fire is not the end. This reconstruction that Scorpio is going through is not random. It has a direction, and having access to something that helps to name that direction, to understand the purpose behind what is being built now, can completely change the depth and intention of this process. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign towards a life of purpose won't tell you what to build. It will help you see where your nature, that specific Scorpio nature, that capacity for rebirth that no other sign possesses in the same way, is already naturally pointing, like a compass you've always had but haven't yet learned to fully read. For Scorpios, in the midst of rebuilding, this isn't a luxury. It's the kind of guidance that makes all the difference between building something new on the same old foundations and building something that truly belongs to who you've become. Something that's the right shape for the size you've reached. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey toward the clarity and genius you deserve. Because what God has prepared for Scorpio is not a comforted version of what was lost. It's not a substitute. It's not a second option that comes to fill a void. It's something that could only be received by someone who has gone through what you've gone through. Something that has the exact shape of what you've become. Not what you were before, not the version that existed in that relationship, but the version that emerged from the process of separation, of revision, of collapse, and of silent reconstruction. There is a logic to the universe that Scorpio senses before understanding, a perception that things connect in ways that are not visible from within the present moment, that there are architectures behind events that only reveal themselves with distance, with the time necessary for the dust to settle enough for the outlines to appear. And when you start looking at what happened to you at the end of that relationship, at the pain of that process, at the spiral of revision, at the bottom you hit, and you begin to see the outlines of a design that wasn't random, something changes internally, not dramatically, not as a noisy revelation, but as a settling, like when a piece that was out of place finally finds its fit and you don't hear the click, you feel it. The person who left, or whom you had to let go of, wasn't the main character in your story. It was a chapter, a necessary true chapter, which had its weight and its purpose. But it was a chapter, not the whole book. And the book continues. And it will continue with a depth that the previous chapter couldn't contain. The love that's coming your way won't resemble what it was. Not because what was wasn't real, but because you're not the same person anymore. You've been through something. You hit rock bottom and came back different. And what corresponds to who you've become has a different quality, a different resonance, an alignment that wouldn't have been possible before because you weren't yet this version of yourself. And while what has been prepared is still unfolding, while you are still on this journey, still recognizing your own contours after everything that has happened, there is a tool that can make this period clearer, more intentional, more purpose-driven instead of just pain-driven. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign towards a life of purpose was created precisely for this moment. For the Scorpio who has already crossed the bottom, who already feels that something is changing, who already realizes that what was lost has made room for something greater, but who still doesn't have a complete vocabulary for what they are experiencing. This book offers that vocabulary, and with it, the ability to move more precisely towards what is genuinely yours, towards what was specifically prepared for who you have become. Because what God has prepared doesn't arrive by accident. It arrives for those who are aligned enough to recognize it when it appears. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey toward the clarity and genius you deserve. So there you have it, Scorpio. The separation you experienced wasn't the universe abandoning you. It was the universe realigning you. There's a huge difference between the two, and it completely changes the meaning of everything that happened. It changes what you do with the pain. It changes what you learn from the silence. It changes what you allow in when the space that was left behind begins to be filled. You are by nature a being of transformation, not because it's easy, but because it's inevitable. Scorpio doesn't stay in the same place after a real loss. It can't. Its nature doesn't allow it. Something always emerges on the other side, denser, clearer, more aligned with what is essential, not the same version as before, a new version, more complete, built with the materials that pain revealed. This process you're going through, this passage that sometimes seems too long, too deep, too heavy, is not a detour in your story. It's the center of it. It's the point where you stopped being just potential and started being real. What God has prepared for you is the size of who you have become, not who you were before. And so, however painful it may be to not have what you once had, there is something on the horizon that corresponds to your current depth, the clarity you have gained, the inner space created by everything you have been through. This was no accident. It never was.